Welcome back to our channel, where we embark on a journey through the intricate labyrinth of relationships, providing valuable insights and guidance along the way. Once again, Josiah Foster took charge of the room. Every detail was meticulously arranged to his exacting standards, reflecting his affinity for minimalist aesthetics, simple, tidy, and flawless. The clinic's allure had drawn him in repeatedly, boasting salaries that eclipsed his current workplace's offerings. Beyond the financial enticements, the very nature of the work here diverged significantly, promising more challenges, and perhaps, a touch of excitement. The added promise of professional growth and advancement further sweetened the deal. Nevertheless, an invisible barrier seemed to halt Josiah's steps each time. Memories from a bygone era resurfaced with vivid intensity. He hearkened back to the time when his father had introduced him to this quaint town, a place that, in Josiah's mind, had been his home since birth. Unbeknownst to him, his perceived lifetime in this town was a mirage. The truth was that Josiah's mother had departed shortly after delivering him into the world, leaving him solely in the care of his father. This revelation had left an indelible mark, recasting his understanding of his early years. Frequently, Josiah had inquired about his mother, only to find his father expertly sidestepping the questions. However, as Josiah commenced his schooling, the conspicuous absence of a mother figure in his life became all too evident. While other children were accompanied by their mothers, Josiah's mother remained conspicuously absent. If she were indeed deceased, as his father claimed, why had they never visited her resting place? Not once did Josiah recall his father speaking of such visits. After mustering courage for a week, he chose a quiet Sunday dinner to finally confront his father. "Dad, I've got a question," Josiah began, his voice determined yet slightly shaky. "Of course, son. Ask away," came the reassuring reply. Josiah continued, "Why does everyone else have a mother, but I don't? And please, don't tell me I was found under a cabbage. I know how babies come into the world." The words hung in the air as Mr. Adam Foster cleared his throat, momentarily surprised by the inquiry. Shifting in his seat, he finally responded, "Well, as I've mentioned before, your mother passed away a long time ago." Josiah mulled over those words. He no longer found that tale believable. "I don't think you're telling me the truth," he asserted. His father's expression shifted to surprise. "Why would I lie to you, my son?" he countered. Josiah's resolve held firm. "I think you've been deceiving me all this time." His father's confusion deepened. "Where is all this coming from, Josiah? Is it your friend Mike who's putting these thoughts in your head?" he questioned. The young boy remained resolute. "Some kids don't have mothers, and I'm one of them," he retorted. His father seemed frustrated. "Why do you keep bringing this up, Dad?" Josiah's voice was tinged with a mix of curiosity and frustration. "Why don't we ever visit her grave? We never talk about her or celebrate her birthdays." He compared his situation to that of his friend Lily, whose father had passed away. Lily's family visits his grave, even though it's far away. Mr. Foster's countenance grew uncertain. He ran his fingers through his hair and briefly concealed his face with his hand. After a pause, he sighed, surrendering to the truth. "All right, I've been lying." "You're right. I've been lying to you all this time. Your mother is alive. She just can't be with us because she's moved far away." He attempted to rationalize, appealing to Josiah's age. "You're just a kid, Josiah. Let's make a deal. When you turn 13, I'll tell you everything. Will that be all right?" Although Josiah was only 8 at the time, he knew his father well. When Adam gave his word, he stuck to it. Despite his father's stern demeanor, Josiah cherished what he had. But he also understood that any misstep would result in proportionate consequences. Thus, he nurtured a profound respect for his possessions and treated them with care. Josiah consented to his father's terms, deciding to keep his inquiries suppressed until he reached 13. While his father's pledge temporarily pacified him, he vowed not to let his father forget that he was owed the complete truth. On his 13th birthday, his father bestowed upon him a grand audio system. Yet, Josiah displayed no excitement for the gift. He gently put it aside and met his father's gaze. "I'm 13 now, Dad. You promised to tell me about Mom." Adam's astonishment was palpable. He hadn't anticipated Josiah remembering, let alone raising the topic with a sigh of remembrance. With a deep breath, he acknowledged, "Well, if you believe you're ready to hear it, then it's time I divulge the truth. Your mother left us for another man she met while pregnant with you. Once she gave birth, she fled. I genuinely have no clue where she is or how she's faring. Frankly, I don't care." This revelation was far from what Josiah had anticipated hearing. In the following days, Josiah embarked on a journey of introspection, grappling with a maelstrom of emotions. The notion of his own mother abandoning her own flesh and blood eluded his comprehension. He pondered whether she had ever spared a thought for her child's well-being. Amidst these tumultuous thoughts, anger and bitterness swelled within him, painting his heart with resentment. A singular sentiment dominated Josiah's emotions toward his mother: hatred. He even contemplated that if she were to return, beseeching his forgiveness, he would staunchly deny her even the acknowledgement she sought. The conversation with his father, though it had taken place years ago, retained its vividness, as if the words had wounded him only last night. However, beyond that conversation, another aspect had wounded him deeply, an ache that persisted. Now in his 30s, Josiah had risen to prominence as a distinguished surgeon, attracting patients from across the nation seeking his expertise. He attributed his accomplishments to his father, whose shadow loomed over him like an unwavering sentinel, ensuring he never missed a college class. When an opportunity for an internship at a premier European hospital arose during Josiah's college years, he faced a dilemma: either embark on the internship or relish the typical college experience with friends. Adam's resolute counsel played a pivotal role in guiding Josiah's decision. It became apparent to Josiah that without his father's unyielding guidance, he would not have scaled the professional heights he presently occupied. Upon reaching these pinnacles, Josiah recognized his vocation as a surgeon, an understanding that eluded many of his colleagues. "I can't" found no place in his professional lexicon. He comprehended that if he couldn't offer solace to a patient, few others could. Yet, confronted by a seemingly straightforward case of chronic inflammation, Josiah, one of the nation's most skilled doctors, found himself engulfed by an overwhelming sense of helplessness for 3 grueling days. He endeavored to coax his resolute father, Adam, into seeking hospital care. Adam, however, insisted he was too engrossed in commitments, tours, and errands to dedicate time for a hospital visit. With each delay, his assurances of attending tomorrow gradually led to a critical juncture. On the 3rd day, Josiah was scheduled for a critical surgery, a case demanding his complete attention and expertise. Determined to approach this operation with meticulous precision, Josiah arose earlier than usual, striving to be fully prepared and unwaveringly focused. He navigated critical cases with extraordinary caution and care. As he returned home that evening, fatigue dragging at his limbs, a sense of disquiet settled within him. The residents, typically resonant with Adam's booming commentary on the news, remained eerily silent, a departure from the norm. A faint murmur from the TV news anchor was the only sound, breaking the silence that enveloped the house. As Josiah ventured into the kitchen to fetch a glass of water, a jarring sight brought him to an abrupt halt. His father lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious and frail. Without hesitation, Josiah dialed 911 and performed the necessary checks to ensure Adam's breathing was steady until the ambulance arrived. Within a mere 10 minutes, the paramedics were on the scene, swiftly transporting Adam to the emergency room. Josiah orchestrated his father's transfer to one of the city's finest hospitals. After an agonizing 12 hours, Adam regained consciousness, greeted by Josiah's unwavering presence by his side. His eyes fluttered open, and a delicate smile graced his lips. Through faint gestures, he beckoned Josiah nearer. "Josiah, there's something I must tell you," Adam began. Josiah tried to ease the gravity of the situation with a light-hearted remark. "Dad, you should rest now. We can talk later. You need to regain your strength." Adam's gaze remained fixed, determination etched on his features. "You're going to need your strength, aren't you?" Josiah ventured. Adam smiled, a semblance of dismissal, and moistened eyes betraying deeper emotions. "Quiet and listen," he trembled, words struggling to escape his lips. With visible effort, he continued, "Josiah, I must reveal the truth. I'll lay it all bare." A momentary pause hung in the air as Adam collected his thoughts. "Your mother didn't abandon you. I took you away from her," he confessed, his voice quivering. "I was the one who left. I married her out of profound love, but she never reciprocated. She never loved me, my son." Adam's gaze shifted upward, eyes glistening. "I coerced her to stay with me. But after you were born, she mustered the courage to escape. I couldn't let her. My overpowering urge to control superseded everything, Josiah." Tears trickled down his cheeks as he wiped them away, his voice unsteady. "I held power and influence. I went to great lengths to prevent her escape, moving us from place to place, ensuring you wouldn't piece the puzzle together," Adam confessed, his words hanging in the air. Josiah remained a captive audience, absorbing this shocking revelation in silence. The room seemed to grow heavier with the weight of unspoken emotions, creating a rift between father and son. Josiah's mind whirled, his strength faltering under the weight of his racing thoughts. Finally, he found his voice, his words trembling. "You made me believe she was the antagonist. I hated her so intensely." Tears welled in his eyes, emotions raw and unfiltered. Adam acknowledged his words with a quiet nod. "Truth be told, I wouldn't fault you if you continued to harbor that hatred toward your mother," he murmured softly. "I've carried the weight of that guilt throughout my life," Adam admitted, his voice quivering with earnestness. He paused, taking a moment to collect himself, closing his eyes. "I've kept photographs and documents in the nightstand drawer," he continued, voice trailing off. However, before he could finish, Josiah stormed into the room, his silence resounding louder than words. Overwhelmed, Josiah found solace on the hospital steps, wrestling with a tumult of emotions and inner turmoil. Gradually, he gathered his bearings and began to wander aimlessly through the town. That afternoon, he found himself entering a bar, indulging in a drink for the first time in 6 years. Amidst his typically work-focused existence, he had repressed such indulgences, maintaining a disciplined approach despite his distress. "Rough day?" a woman's voice called out. Dr. Foster, an older woman likely in her 60s, sat a few feet away, offering a sympathetic smile. Josiah was taken aback by her recognition. "You could say that," he replied. The woman continued, "You've been an exceptional doctor, Josiah." "Thank you." Puzzled, he inquired, "Have we met before?" Though he possessed an exceptional memory for patients, her face eluded him. She answered, "In fact, you changed my life without performing a single procedure." Memories of their encounter resurfaced, causing Josiah to chuckle and delve into conversation. "So you followed my advice and stopped worrying?" he probed. "Absolutely. I did exactly as you suggested," the woman, Sarah Edwards, responded, rekindling the memory of their interaction. Their conversation hinged on Josiah's approach when Sarah had feared she was afflicted by tumors. Instead of rushing to conduct tests, he had taken her to a local coffee shop, offering reassurance and advising her to take things one step at a time. He had forgotten the incident, but it had left an enduring impression on her. Josiah's heart was tugged by the encounter. He listened as Sarah spoke about her progress. Observing his weary countenance, Sarah extended her support. "Josiah, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Let me know if you need anything." Josiah appreciated her offer, engaging in more conversation. Eventually, he shared his own story, the weight lifting from his chest as he spoke. Sarah assured him she'd remain in touch and left him with a poignant thought: it's never too late to make things right. Upon returning to the hospital later that evening, Josiah received the news of his father's passing. Taking several days off, Josiah grappled with a torrent of conflicting emotions in the wake of the news, attempting to navigate through the storm within him. On one hand, his father had nurtured him and propelled him toward his present achievements. Conversely, that very same figure had torn him apart from his mother, seeding his heart with an enduring animosity towards her. A week later, Josiah embarked on a journey to the city where his mother had last been known to reside. While en route, an unexpected call from a private clinic extended a prestigious job offer. Although most doctors would have eagerly seized the opportunity, Josiah declined. He dedicated 3 years to his mother's former town, hoping to unearth traces of her existence. Yet, his quest yielded little more than her departure from the town a decade prior. Having exhausted every lead, Josiah concluded it was time to pivot. Upon his return, a leadership role at his former hospital was proffered, one he embraced with the assurance of his qualifications. Suddenly, a nurse burst into his office, delivering urgent news of a stabbing victim. Responding promptly, Josiah hurried to the reception area, where a man bearing knife wounds awaited. The man's gaze locked with Josiah's as he implored, "Doctor, my life is in your hands. My 3 small children depend on me, and my wife won't survive without me." Josiah's reply carried a touch of irony: "Well, if our agenda doesn't involve death, let's explore our options." A fellow doctor expressed skepticism at Josiah's approach. Offering a grim prognosis, the doctor suggested they had limited choices, estimating a mere 10 minutes left for the patient. Unperturbed by the skepticism, Josiah marshaled the medical team and issued directives. Within 15 minutes, he was in the operating room, guided by the nurse's update that the patient, a truck driver, had fallen prey to robbers while returning home late at night. 2 arduous hours later, Josiah emerged from the operating theater, his patient's countenance markedly improved from when he had been admitted. The operation had achieved its intended success. The initially pessimistic doctor conceded, acknowledging, "Perhaps we've brought in a cocky elitist with connections. My earlier judgment was amiss. There's much to glean from your approach." Acknowledging the redemption he had provided to this man's life, Josiah concluded his shift, weary yet fulfilled. He exchanged farewells with the nurses in the lobby and exited the hospital. A young ophthalmologist approached him, offering a tidbit of information. "There's a woman trying to locate you. I don't know her personally, but she seems unique." The young doctor's words lacked any preamble, prompting Josiah to hasten his return to the hospital. There, stationed at the reception desk, stood a vaguely familiar figure. The realization washed over him like a wave: it was Sarah Edwards, the woman from the bar whom he had once steered away from an unnecessary operation. As Josiah laid eyes on her, a sense of foreboding gripped his heart. The weight of sorrow etched onto her visage and the furrowed lines on her brow hinted at her distress. He couldn't help but speculate whether self-doubt plagued her. "Again, me," she said, and an even more unnerving thought fluttered into Josiah's mind: had she received the dreaded news necessitating surgery? But when her gaze met his, her face transformed with warmth, as though sunlight had pierced through her clouds. Her approach was akin to a sprint, culminating in an embrace. "Josiah, it's truly wonderful to see you again. Our paths have been apart for too long," she exclaimed. "I've been searching high and low for you. Word had spread that you'd relocated, which left a hollow ache. But fortune favored me, and I met a kind soul here who shared your return. I wasted no time in getting here, Sarah added, her enthusiasm apparent. Reunited with his long-lost friend, Josiah couldn't help but be puzzled by her persistent determination to find him. Don't fret, Josiah. I'm not stalking you to barrage you with endless questions, Sarah reassured him, a glint of mischief in her eye. You wouldn't believe what transpired. Who knew my tendency to talk could prove advantageous? His bewilderment remained, and Sarah sensed it. She placed a comforting hand on his back. Follow me, I have something to share, she suggested, guiding him to her car. Reaching into the glove compartment, she extracted a photograph that left Josiah stupefied. I can't guarantee if this is the woman you're seeking, but she resides in the nearby project. Regrettably, we aren't on the best terms. You might want to venture there on your own. Sarah advised him before handing over the photo. She jotted her phone number onto a piece of paper, offering reassurance that she was a call away if he ever required assistance. As Josiah exited the car, he noticed the young doctor still lingering nearby, his gaze settling upon her. She exuded elegance, and his attention involuntarily gravitated to her unadorned hands, void of any rings. Eventually, they went their separate ways. Josiah found himself drawn toward the projects, his curiosity outweighing his fatigue and leaving him with ample time to spare. Rounding a corner, Josiah discerned faint footsteps, subtly tracking his movements. He glanced back to witness his young colleague drawing near. May I accompany you? She inquired, her eyes dancing with intrigue. Deep inside, Josiah's smile bloomed. Her offer to join him warmed his heart, even though he couldn't assure her of any outcomes. In return, of course. If you're willing to assist me in finding someone profoundly important, let's proceed, Josiah responded, a sense of warmth tinting his features. His hand extended in a friendly handshake. I'm Josiah Foster. Her reply came with a smile. I'm well acquainted with you. Your name has become a common term in these parts since your recent operation. Madison, she introduced herself. Nice to meet you. Engaging in pleasant conversation, they barely noticed how the towering project buildings had encroached on their surroundings. I believe we're in the right neighborhood, Josiah remarked, his gaze sweeping the area. How about we begin knocking on doors? If we don't find what we're looking for, we can apologize and move on. Madison nodded in agreement. Sounds like a solid plan. Together, they visited various residences, their knocks met with a spectrum of reactions. Surprise, suspicion, and even the approach of law enforcement officers shifted their dynamics. The officers altered their approach, now seeking directions. Eventually, fortune favored them. A busy mother managing 5 children directed them to a door in a neighboring building. Armed with a description of the woman they sought, they approached the indicated door. To their astonishment, Josiah tapped it gently and the door swung open, unlocked and emitting a soft creak. Swiftly, a voice resonated from the dimly lit interior, inviting them inside. Navigating through the shadowy corridor, they emerged into a room awash with unexpected brightness and orderliness. The room's contents exuded a vintage aura, yet they were maintained with immaculate precision. Josiah's gaze swept across the environment, settling on a woman reclining on a sofa. However, it was a familiar photograph that left him momentarily transfixed in disbelief: his father, a young woman, and an infant Josiah, around 3 months old. Recognition struck him. A smaller version of the same picture had once held a cherished place among his father's possessions. Drawn to the photograph, Josiah moved closer, pausing as he absorbed each nuance of the image. His contemplation was interrupted by a voice echoing behind him. I spent countless days in pursuit of you, but every endeavor led to disappointment, the voice behind him initiated. Adam successfully shielded you from me. The speaker continued, when I eventually stumbled upon a promising lead, I hesitated. I was well aware of your disdain for me. I won't offer an apology. If my presence is unwelcome, simply inform me, and I'll vanish without a trace." Adam had often issued stern threats to Mrs. Scott, yet beneath his intimidating demeanor, he had never truly intended to act on them. The threats were more a tactic to incite fear than a genuine danger. "He carries a profound animosity towards you, a sentiment you're well familiar with," the voice cautioned. "Should you choose to contact him, it will only lead to misery for both. Ignoring my counsel and seeking him out would result in a lifetime of remorse." Adam had once warned her that his unrequited love for Mrs. Scott had curdled into bitterness, and this was his form of retaliation. Turning around, Josiah's eyes met those of the young doctor, whose jaw hung open in response to the unfolding scene. His own eyes mirrored her astonishment, his thoughts swirling in a vortex of shock and disbelief. Numerous words were poised on his tongue, but each idea felt more overwhelming than the last. Images of his father danced through his mind, stoking the embers of lingering resentment. Yet, as his gaze fell upon the woman standing before him, his mother, the fiery anger began to dissipate, replaced by sadness, mourning, and a nascent affection. Stemming the tide of thoughts, he summoned newfound resolve and finally uttered the words, "Mom, let's go home." Josiah unveiled that his father had confessed everything before his passing, and he had dedicated the past 3 years to relentless searching within their city. With a heavy sigh, he confessed, "I couldn't locate you, Mom." His admission carried a weight of regret, his voice trembling with emotion. Tears welled in her eyes as she responded, her voice equally trembling, "I combed every corner searching for you." United by their shared longing, they departed the apartment. Turning to his colleague, Josiah felt ready to articulate his next thought. "Madison, would you be interested in joining us for dinner?" he inquired, catching her off guard. A smile tugged at her lips, hesitation briefly clouding her features. Before she could answer, Josiah spoke again. "Our story is quite captivating. Let me jot down the address." With swift penmanship, he scribbled her address on a scrap of paper and passed it to Madison. "Thank you, Josiah." "I'll be there," she replied, accepting the invitation with a heartfelt smile. As Mrs. Barbara Scott entered the apartment, her gaze was drawn to the collection of photographs gracing the walls. The sight momentarily arrested her, her hand instinctively moving to her chest as an old fear resurfaced. "It's been years, but the thought that Adam might still be here terrifies me," she admitted, her voice shaky. "Despite his charming facade, to me, he was a monster. Perhaps if I had somehow managed to love him, our story would have taken a different course. But despite my best efforts, I couldn't muster any affection for him, let alone offer his mother any solace," Josiah responded, trying to provide comfort. "Don't blame yourself, Mom. We'll work through this. In fact, we should be grateful that he revealed everything to me. I might never have been able to believe your side of the story without that." Their conversation continued, but Mrs. Scott eventually fell into a contemplative silence. "You need some rest, my son. You've just finished a night shift," she gently advised, hinting at Madison's imminent visit. Josiah couldn't help but blush. "What do you think of her?" he asked with a tentative smile. Mrs. Scott's eyes twinkled with approval as she replied, "I liked her very much. There's a kindness in her eyes. People with eyes like that are honest and open." As Josiah drifted off to sleep, he held on to his mother's hand, savoring a moment he had yearned for throughout his childhood. He recalled the countless nights when he had clung to a toy, ensuring his father never caught him doing so. Adam had scorned displays of vulnerability or tenderness, so Josiah had pretended the toy was his mother's comforting touch. He would spin stories in his mind, imagining them as tales told by his mother, soothing him into slumber. Now, those memories felt surreal, as the presence of his mother beside him was finally a reality. Gently, Mrs. Scott draped a blanket over Josiah and tucked him in. Leaning over, she placed a tender kiss on his forehead before quietly leaving him to rest. Turning to the kitchen, she embarked on preparing dinner for the evening. In Josiah's dreams, a serene smile adorned his face. The peacefulness of his slumber fulfilled his yearning for the tender moments of his childhood dreams. The desires of his past were now realized in the tranquil embrace of his reality. His peaceful slumber was interrupted by the familiar clinking of dishes from the kitchen, bringing him back to wakefulness. Amid the warm embrace of their home, Josiah's mother was bustling around, setting the table for their first shared meal. The tantalizing aroma that filled the air seemed to mend the lost years between them. "It smells delicious after so many lost years," Josiah remarked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and taking in the comforting scent enveloping the apartment. His compliment evoked a radiant smile from Mrs. Scott, her happiness evident in her expression. "Mom, I've also invited the lady who borrowed the photo from you. She'll be joining us for dinner," Josiah explained, his intention clear as he prepared his mother for the unexpected guest. At first, Mrs. Scott appeared puzzled, but as Sarah Edwards arrived later that evening, understanding dawned upon her. "I'm truly sorry for what I told you earlier," Mrs. Scott offered Sarah an apologetic look. "No need to worry. I was rather persistent with my questions." "I owe you an apology as well," Sarah responded graciously, her generosity evident. "No matter what happened, it eventually led me to my mother," Josiah interjected, his smile genuine and wide. Drawing them close, he enveloped both women in a warm hug, an air of reconciliation surrounding them. Seated around the dinner table, Josiah, his mother, Madison from the eye surgery department, and the spirited Sarah Edwards savored every morsel of the delectable meal. The atmosphere was imbued with warmth and anticipation, signifying the dawn of a promising new chapter in Josiah's life. As the evening unfolded, Mrs. Scott and Sarah became inseparable companions, engaging in lively conversations that knew no boundaries. Their dialogue flowed freely, spanning a range of subjects from shared experiences to future aspirations, cementing a harmonious bond between them. Meanwhile, Josiah and Madison's connection deepened as they spent more time together outside of work. Madison's frequent visits to Josiah's home not only offered help with household tasks but also created a space of belonging and camaraderie. Laughter and heartfelt exchanges filled their evenings, forming the foundation for lasting friendships. Amid the progress Josiah made in his life, a lingering void persisted. Unresolved emotions toward his late father haunted him, and the closure he yearned for remained elusive. He grappled with the absence of an apology his mother deserved from his father, grappling with regret and frustration. His mother, a beacon of strength and resilience, undoubtedly warranted an apology from her late husband. Josiah often found himself lost in thoughts, pondering what his father might have said if he'd lived long enough to make amends for his past. Yet, the heartfelt apology Mrs. Scott deserved never came, a fact that stirred both remorse and frustration in Josiah's heart. Amidst these moments of emotional turmoil, Josiah found solace in the empathetic company of his friends. Madison and Sarah, the two women who had played pivotal roles in reuniting him with his estranged mother, sensed the weight of indecision that weighed on Josiah's shoulders. They recognized his yearning for closure, his desire to resolve the inner conflict that had grown increasingly difficult to ignore. On one balmy evening, as they sat beneath a star-studded sky, Madison turned to Josiah. Her eyes radiated sincerity, a shared pain evident within them. Reaching out to hold his hand, she conveyed a sense of empathy and connection. "Josiah, remember that closure isn't about others. It's about finding peace within yourself. Perhaps your father will never give your mother the apology she deserves, but you can choose to forgive him, for her and for yourself." Thank you for watching and listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback in the comments below. See you next time.